So there are two main types of notation. There's interval notation and set notation. So interval notation includes the following symbols. It includes square brackets or circular brackets. When you see square brackets, that means that the end value is included. It's called a closed interval. And when you see circular brackets, it means that the end point is excluded or not included, which is called an open interval. Set notation includes the greater than or less than signs. When the point is included, it has that equality, and when the point is excluded, then it has a strictly greater than or strictly less than sign. Okay. These really mean the exact same thing, it's just two different ways of writing your answer down. So here's some examples. So for example, if you wanted to write that x is between -1 and 5, not including the endpoints, the way you would do it is you would say x is an element of, and then because you don't want to include the endpoints, you would put circular brackets. For the next one here, this time x is between 4 and 17, and it can be equal to 4. So because we're allowed to be equal to 4, then in interval notation we would put a square bracket, because square bracket means including. And then because it can't be equal to 17, the 17 still gets a round bracket. Okay, so this means include the 4, and then go all the way up to 17, but don't include the 17. Okay, if we wanted to include both endpoints, so for example when x is between or equal to -1 and -5, then we would put x is an element of square brackets, -5, comma, -1, square bracket. When we have the greater than or equal to 5, then we're actually going from 5 to infinity. Right? Everything above 5. So we want to include the 5 because there's an equal sign there. So we put a square bracket around the 5. And infinity can never actually be included, so it always gets a round bracket. And then if we wanted it to be less than 7, then really what we're doing is we're going from -infinity all the way to 7, and we can't include -infinity, so it's a round bracket, and then they also didn't want us to include 7, so it would get a round bracket as well. When we're doing multiple intervals, then instead of putting a comma between them, we put a U, and this means union. Okay. And it really just means the exact same thing as or. So we just treat each one separately, and then we just put that U between them. So if x is going to be less than or equal to -1, then we say it goes from -infinity to -1. We put a circular bracket to not include the -infinity. We put a square bracket to include the -1. Okay, and then or, it can be between 5 and 7 with the 5 being included. Let's pretend that there's not a negative on that 5. So we would put the square bracket to include the 5, comma 7, and we'd put the round bracket because we don't want the 7 included. So there is set notation that we're used to, and there is interval notation. Okay, once again, for all the answers that you're giving for all the inequality questions, you can state your answer in either one of these forms. It doesn't matter to me at all. But I do want you guys to be able to recognize both forms, because sometimes you will see one over the other depending on what math textbook you're using or what site you're using on the internet. And also depending on what country you're in, sometimes they lean more towards interval notation or set notation.